Far beyond the stars, where humans had only begun to explore, there was a planet known as Xylora. Its towering cities sparkled in the darkness of space, and its inhabitants were far more advanced than humans could ever imagine. The Xylorans were a proud race, with skin that shimmered like the moon and eyes that glowed softly in the night. They were warriors, thinkers, and rulers of many worlds, and their princess, Elara, was the most admired of them all. But there was one thing Elara did not understand, and it bothered her more than anything human love. Love, she said one day, sitting on her grand silver throne, is pointless. It's full of weakness. Why would anyone want that? Her advisors nodded in agreement, but one of them, a wise elder named Xiron, raised a finger. "Your Highness, we must not judge what we do not understand." Princess Elara tilted her head, her silver hair catching the light. "Then let's understand it." A group of humans had arrived on Xylora to work on a peace agreement, and among them was Captain Leo, a brave astronaut with messy brown hair, sharp blue eyes, and a habit of always speaking his mind. Leo had never met anyone like Elara before, someone so cold yet so captivating. One day, Leo was invited to the palace to meet the royal family. He stood in the grand hall, staring up at the crystal ceiling, feeling like an ant inside a giant's home. Elara sat on her throne, watching him curiously. So she said with a slight smirk, "You're the human who thinks love is such a great thing." Leo was caught off guard by her question. Yes, I guess you could say that. Love is one of the best things about being human." Elara raised an eyebrow. "Prove it." Leo blinked, unsure what she meant. "Prove." Love. Elara stood up, her long silver gown flowing behind her as she walked toward him. "You heard me. Prove that love is more than just weakness. Show me." Leo wasn't sure what to say, but he wasn't one to back down from a challenge. "All right, I'll show you. But love isn't something you can just explain. It's something you have to feel." Elara crossed her arms. "Then I will feel it. Show me what it is that makes you humans so obsessed with this idea of love." And so, a strange journey began. Leo didn't know how he was supposed to show love to someone who had never felt it before, but he was determined to try. Over the next few days, he spent time with Elara, showing her the small things humans did when they cared about someone. He brought her flowers from Earth, explaining how people gave them to show affection. Elara looked at the bouquet of bright red roses with confusion. "These are plants. What am I supposed to do with them?" "Smell them," Leo said, holding them up to her nose. Elara blinked. "They smell. Interesting," she said slowly, though she didn't seem impressed. "Next." Leo tried to teach her about the idea of giving gifts. He brought her a simple necklace he had crafted from small stones he found on Xylora. "Humans give gifts to show they care," he explained. Elara took the necklace and stared at it. "This is nice," she said. But her voice was uncertain. "But I still do not understand what this has to do with love." Leo scratched his head, feeling a bit frustrated. How could he show someone like Elara what love meant when she didn't seem to care about the things that usually made people feel special? Elara looked back at the stars. "Perhaps. I am starting to understand." The next day, things seemed different. Elara wasn't as distant as before. She didn't smile, but Leo could tell something had shifted. She asked him more questions about Earth, about human life, and about love. She seemed genuinely curious, even though she still didn't completely get it. One day, Elara invited Leo to join her on a tour of Xylora's most beautiful places. They visited shimmering lakes, towering mountains, and fields of glowing flowers. Elara told him stories of her people, of their battles, and their traditions. Leo listened carefully, realizing that there was much more to Elara than just being a cold princess. As they stood on the edge of a cliff, looking out at the endless horizon, Elara turned to Leo. "Your people, they are strange," she said. "But perhaps there is something to this idea of love after all." Leo smiled. "You're starting to see it." Elara nodded slowly. "I am beginning to understand that love is not just about weakness. It is about connection. About trust." Leo felt his heart lift at her words. "Exactly. It's about finding someone you can share everything with, even the hard times." Elara looked at him, her eyes serious. "I still have much to learn about this, human emotion. But I am willing to try." Leo's smile widened. "That's all it takes, just trying." And so their journey continued, with Elara slowly learning what it meant to love and Leo discovering that maybe, Just maybe, he was starting to feel something for the alien princess. But their story was far from over, and the challenges ahead would test them in ways they never expected. The question remained, could love truly bridge the gap between two worlds so different? Only time would tell. As days turned into weeks, Leo and Alara grew closer. Though neither of them quite knew what to call it, their time together became less about teaching and more about simply being with each other, whether they were exploring the strange landscapes of Xylora or sitting in silence under the stars. There was a connection between them that both felt but neither spoke of. One evening, while watching the twin moons of Xylora rise over a crystalline lake, Alara broke the silence. "Leo," she began, her voice softer than usual, "this connection we share, it confuses me." "I have never felt anything like it before." Leo glanced at her, trying to read her expression, but as always she was hard to figure out. "What confuses you about it?" he asked. Alara sighed, a rare show of vulnerability. "I understand that humans value these emotions, this bond you call love. But for me, it is still strange. I feel drawn to you, yet I don't fully understand why." Leo smiled gently. "It's okay not to understand everything. Love doesn't always make sense, even to us humans." Alara seemed to ponder his words, her glowing eyes reflecting the moons. "On Xylora, emotions are seen as distractions. They are not taught, nor are they encouraged. My entire life I have been trained to be strong, to lead without hesitation. But when I am with you, I feel different." Leo's heart raced. He wasn't sure what to say. He had been trying to show Alara what love meant, but he hadn't realized that along the way he had started to fall for her. And now, hearing her admit that she felt something too, it made everything more complicated. "Well," Leo said, trying to keep his voice steady, "maybe feeling different is the first step. Love isn't about being the same all the time. It's about letting someone in, even when you don't fully understand it." Alara turned to him, her expression unreadable. "Letting someone in. Does that not make you vulnerable?" Leo nodded. "Yeah, it does. But that's the point. Love is about trusting someone with that vulnerability, knowing they won't use it against you." Alara was silent for a long moment, her gaze locked on his. Then, to Leo's surprise, she reached out and placed her hand on his. Her skin was cool to the touch. But there was something warm in the gesture. "Perhaps there is more strength in vulnerability than I once thought," she said quietly. Leo's heart leapt, but before he could say anything, a sudden burst of light shot across the sky. It wasn't the usual shooting star or Xyloran phenomena. They both recognized it immediately. It was a signal flare. Trouble. Without a word, Alara stood, her warrior instincts kicking in. "That's coming from the northern border," she said. "We must go." Leo grabbed his communicator and nodded. "Let's move." They raced back to the palace, where they were met by Xiron, the elder advisor. His expression was grim. "Your Highness, we have received word of a potential attack from a rival planet. The northern defenses have been breached." Alara didn't hesitate. "Prepare the guards. I will lead them myself." Leo watched as Alara shifted into full battle mode. The softness from just moments ago was gone, replaced by the fierce warrior he had first met. But even in this state, there was something different about her now, something more human. "I'm coming with you," Leo said, stepping forward. Alara shook her head. "This is not your fight, Leo. You are a guest here." "I may be a guest," Leo replied, his voice firm, "but I'm not standing by while you face this alone." Alara looked at him for a long moment, her eyes filled with uncertainty. But finally she nodded. "Very well. But stay close to me." Together, they raced to the northern border, where the rival forces had begun their assault. The battle was fierce, and for the first time, Leo saw Alara in her true element. She fought with a grace and strength that was almost otherworldly, her silver armor gleaming as she took down enemy after enemy. But even as she fought, Leo noticed something different about her. She wasn't just fighting out of duty, she was fighting to protect something, or perhaps someone, important to her. The battle raged on for hours, and when the dust finally settled, the Xyloran forces had won. But the cost had been great. Many lives were lost, and the northern cities were in ruins. As the survivors regrouped, Leo found Alara standing at the edge of the battlefield, looking out at the destruction. Her shoulders were tense, and there was a sadness in her eyes that Leo had never seen before. He walked up to her, unsure of what to say. "Are you all right?" he asked softly. Alara didn't answer right away. She just stared at the horizon, her expression distant. "This is the price of power," she said quietly. "War, loss, sacrifice. It is what I have been trained for my entire life." And yet Leo waited, knowing she wasn't finished. And yet Aelara continued, her voice softer now. "I find myself wondering if there is more to life than this, than endless battles and empty victories." Leo stepped closer, his heart aching for her. "There is more," he said gently. "There's love, connection, hope. Those are the things that make life worth living." Aelara looked at him, her eyes filled with a mix of emotions. "And do you truly believe that love can make a difference in a world like this?" Leo nodded. "I do. Love doesn't fix everything, but it gives us something to fight for, something worth protecting." For the first time since the battle had ended, Aelara smiled, a small, sad smile, but a smile nonetheless. "Perhaps you are right, Leo. Perhaps I have been blind to what truly matters." Leo reached out and took her hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. "You're not blind, Aelara. You're just learning. And I'm here to help you, no matter how long it takes." Aelara squeezed his hand back, her eyes softening. "Thank you, Leo. I still have much to learn about human love. But with you by my side, I believe I can." And as they stood together on the battlefield, hand in hand, the stars shining above them, their journey together continued, one of love, discovery, and the hope that even in a world filled with war and chaos, there could be something worth fighting for. The days following the battle were quieter, but the tension on Xylora hadn't disappeared. The planet was still recovering, and there was an uneasy sense that more trouble could come at any moment. The city was being rebuilt, and Princess Aelara took charge, overseeing the efforts with a calm but determined focus. Leo remained at her side, helping where he could and trying to offer his support. As much as Aelara had shown her strength on the battlefield, Leo knew the emotional toll was harder for her. He could see it in her eyes when she thought no one was watching. One evening, after a long day of organizing supplies and speaking with her people, Aelara and Leo found themselves back at the edge of the Crystal Lake. It had become their quiet spot, where they could talk freely, away from the pressures of the palace. Aelara sat down on the grass, staring at her reflection in the water. Leo sat beside her, waiting for her to speak. After a few minutes, she sighed. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said," Aelara began, her voice quiet. "About love, about how it gives humans something to fight for." Leo looked at her, his heart racing a little. "And what do you think?" Aelara didn't answer right away. She reached down, dipping her fingers into the water, watching the ripples spread out across the surface. "I think I understand it better now. But it's also the best thing in the universe." Aelara looked up at him, her expression vulnerable in a way he had never seen before. "I don't know if I'm ready for this, for these feelings. They make me feel weak." Leo shook his head. "You're not weak, Aelara. You're one of the strongest people I've ever met, and feeling love doesn't change that. It makes you stronger, because it gives you something to protect, something worth fighting for." Aelara squeezed his hand, her eyes softening. "And you are worth fighting for." Leo smiled, his heart pounding in his chest. "I hope so." For a moment they sat there in silence, the weight of their unspoken feelings hanging between them. Then, slowly, Aelara leaned in, her face inches from his. Leo's breath hitched as she closed the distance, her lips brushing his in a soft, tentative kiss. It was brief, but it was enough to send a spark of warmth through Leo's entire body. When they pulled apart, Aelara's eyes were wide, as if she couldn't quite believe what had just happened. Leo smiled softly. "See? Not so scary, right?" Aelara blinked. Then a small smile tugged at the corners of her mouth. "Perhaps not as scary as I thought." They sat in silence for a while, the stars twinkling above them, the weight of their growing connection settling comfortably between them. But as peaceful as the moment was, Leo knew there were still challenges ahead. The political situation on Xylora was becoming more complicated. The attack from the rival planet had sparked unrest, and rumors of more conflicts were spreading. Aelara's leadership was being tested, and there were whispers that some of the Xyloran council members didn't believe in her ability to handle the situation, especially now that she seemed to be forming a bond with a human. One afternoon, while Leo was helping with the reconstruction efforts, he overheard two Xyloran guards talking. "The princess has grown weak," one of them muttered. "Ever since that human arrived, she's been different." "She's distracted," the other agreed. "Love is a human flaw. It has no place in our leadership. Leo felt a pang of anger, but he forced himself to stay calm. He knew that Xyloran saw emotions differently, and he wasn't here to make enemies. But it was clear that his presence and the feelings between him and Elara were causing tension. Perhaps not as scary as I thought. They sat in silence for a while, the stars twinkling above them, the weight of their growing connection settling comfortably between them. But as peaceful as the moment was, Leo knew there were still challenges ahead. The political situation on Xylora was becoming more complicated. The attack from the rival planet had sparked unrest, and rumors of more conflicts were spreading. Elara's leadership was being tested, and there were whispers that some of the Xyloran council members didn't believe in her ability to handle the situation, especially now that she seemed to be forming a bond with a human. One afternoon, while Leo was helping with the reconstruction efforts, he overheard two Xyloran guards talking. "The princess has grown weak," one of them muttered. "Ever since that human arrived, she's been different." "She's distracted," the other agreed. "Love is a human flaw. It has no place in our leadership." Leo felt a pang of anger, but he forced himself to stay calm. He knew that Xyloran saw emotions differently, and he wasn't here to make enemies. But it was clear that his presence and the feelings between him and Elara were causing tension. That evening, Leo found Elara in the palace gardens, sitting alone on a stone bench. She looked troubled, her eyes distant. "Hey," Leo said softly, sitting down beside her. "You okay?" Elara sighed, rubbing her forehead. "The council is divided. Some of them think I'm unfit to lead because I've allowed myself to grow close to you." Leo frowned. "That's not fair. You're the strongest leader they have, and your feelings don't change that." Elara shook her head. "To them it does. They believe that emotions cloud judgment, that love makes one weak. I've spent my entire life proving them wrong, but now, I'm not sure." Leo took her hand, squeezing it gently. "You've proven them wrong before, and you'll do it again. Love doesn't make you weaker, Elara. It makes you fight harder." Elara looked at him, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "But what if they're right? What if I've allowed myself to be blinded by this connection we have?" Leo's heart ached at the doubt in her voice. "If you believe that, then you're underestimating yourself. You're still the same strong, incredible leader you've always been. Love hasn't changed that. It's made you even more powerful." Elara was silent for a long moment, her gaze locked on his. Then, slowly, she nodded. "You're right. I cannot let their doubts control me. I will lead my people as I always have, with strength, but also with the understanding of what truly matters." Leo smiled, relief washing over him. "That's the Elara I know." But even as Elara's resolve strengthened, the challenges ahead loomed larger. The political unrest on Xylora was growing, and the rival planets were preparing for more conflict. And amid it all, the bond between Elara and Leo was deepening, even as it put them both in danger. As they faced the uncertain future together, one thing was clear: their journey was far from over, and the road ahead would test their love, and their strength, and their very survival. As the days passed, the tension in Xylora only grew thicker. Despite Elara's attempts to keep her focus on leading her people, the whispers among the council and the unease among the citizens persisted. Leo could see the strain wearing on her, even if she wouldn't admit it. The pressure of leadership and the weight of their growing feelings created a storm that neither of them could fully control. One morning, Elara summoned the council for an emergency meeting. The situation had become critical. There were reports of another impending attack from the rival planet, and this time it was expected to be even more devastating. The Xyloran defenses were still weak from the last battle, and the council was divided on how to respond. Leo stood by Elara's side as she addressed the room. The council members, dressed in flowing robes that shimmered with the colors of their rank, watched her closely, their expressions a mix of skepticism and concern. "We cannot afford to wait any longer," Elara said, her voice steady but firm. "We must strengthen our defenses and prepare for the worst. I will lead the charge personally, but I need the full support of this council." One of the older council members, a stern man named Vilos, rose to his feet. His silver hair and sharp features gave him an air of authority, and when he spoke, his voice was laced with doubt. "Your Highness, with all due respect, some of us believe that you're recent. Distractions have clouded your judgment. Xylora needs a leader who is fully focused on the safety of our planet, not entangled in personal matters." Leo's jaw clenched, But before he could speak, Elara held up a hand, stopping him. She met Vailos' gaze with a calm, steady look. "I understand your concerns, Vailos, but I assure you my personal feelings do not interfere with my duty to this planet. I have always put Xylora first, and I will continue to do so." Vailos narrowed his eyes. "And yet, the presence of this human," he gestured toward Leo, "has already caused unrest among the people. They question your priorities." We all do. A murmur of agreement rippled through the council. Leo felt a knot tighten in his chest. He knew that being with Elara had caused trouble, but hearing it laid out like this made it feel worse. He wanted to defend her, to shout that she was the strongest leader they had. But he also knew that this wasn't his fight to lead. Elara stood tall, her gaze unwavering. "Leo's presence here is not the cause of our problems. The attack on our planet is, and the only way we will survive what's coming is if we stand together. I will not allow Xylora to be destroyed because of petty fears or outdated traditions." The council fell silent, her words cutting through the tension like a blade. For a moment, no one spoke, the weight of Elara's resolve hanging in the air. Then, Vela spoke again, his tone softer, but still laced with doubt. "If you believe you can lead us through this storm, we will follow you. But mark my words, Your Highness, if you fail, Xylora will need a new leader." Elara didn't flinch. "I will not fail with that." The council meeting ended, and the room slowly emptied. Leo stayed behind with Elara, watching her closely as the last of the council members left. "Are you okay?" Leo asked softly, stepping closer to her. Elara took a deep breath, her shoulders relaxing just a little. "I'm fine. This is what leadership looks like: doubt, criticism. I've dealt with it before." Leo frowned. "Yeah, but this feels different. They're doubting you because of me." Elara shook her head, turning to face him. "No, Leo, they're doubting me because they fear change, and you represent change, something they've never had to face before." Leo didn't argue. He knew she was right. Xylora had been isolated from the rest of the galaxy for so long that the idea of a human, an outsider, forming a bond with their princess was seen as a threat to their way of life. But that didn't change how he felt. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was making things harder for her. "I just don't want to be the reason you lose their trust," Leo said quietly. Elara stepped closer, placing a hand on his cheek. "You're not the reason, Leo. You're the reason I'm stronger. I need you by my side. We'll face this together." Leo nodded, his heart swelling with a mix of pride and affection. He placed his hand over hers, squeezing it gently. "I'm with you." Always the next few days were a whirlwind of preparations. Elara led her forces, strengthening the defenses and preparing for the worst. The looming threat of war weighed heavily on everyone, but there was also a sense of determination in the air. The Xylorans were ready to defend their home, and Elara was leading them with a fierce resolve. As the days passed, Leo noticed something changing in Elara. She was still the strong, confident leader he had come to admire, but there was a softness to her now, an openness that hadn't been there before. It was as if their bond had unlocked a part of her that she had kept hidden for so long. One night, as they sat together by the crystal lake, Elara leaned her head on Leo's shoulder, something she had never done before. "Do you think we'll survive this?" she asked quietly, her voice laced with vulnerability. Leo wrapped his arm around her, pulling her closer. "We will. Because we're not just fighting for Xylora, we're fighting for each other." Elara smiled softly, her fingers lacing through his. "I never thought I would say this, but I'm glad you came into my life, Leo. You've shown me a world beyond duty and power. You've shown me what it means to truly care for someone." Leo's heart swelled with emotion. He turned to face her, his eyes searching hers. "I'm glad I found you too, Elara. You've shown me what it means to be strong, to lead with grace and courage. And you've made me want to be a better person." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of their words settling between them. Then, slowly, Elara leaned in, her lips brushing against his in a soft, tender kiss. It was a kiss filled with unspoken promises and the hope that, no matter what happened, they would face it together. But even as their bond deepened, the storm on the horizon grew closer. The rival planet's forces were preparing for an all-out attack, and the fate of Xylora and their love hung in the balance. Their journey was far from over, and the next chapter of their story would test them in ways they had never imagined. The day of the battle finally arrived, and the tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. The skies over Xylora darkened as the enemy ships approached, their massive shadows looming ominously over the city. Elara stood at the front lines, her armor gleaming under the dim light, her sword at her side, ready for the fight. Leo was right beside her, wearing a makeshift suit of armor the Xylorans had fashioned for him. It wasn't much, but it made him feel like he belonged. "This is it," Leo said, looking over at Elara. No turning back now. Elara smiled softly, her calm demeanor never faltering. "You've always been ready for a fight, haven't you?" Leo chuckled, a playful grin spreading across his face. "I'm just here to impress the princess. No pressure," right? Elara's lips twitched. "I'm already impressed." As the enemy ships descended, Xylora's defenses roared to life. The air was filled with the sounds of blaster fire, explosions, and the clash of energy shields. Elara led her troops with precision and bravery, cutting through enemy lines with the grace and power of a seasoned warrior. Leo, for his part, held his own surprisingly well, dodging blasts and knocking out enemy soldiers with a mixture of luck and the skills he'd picked up along the way. At one point, the two found themselves back to back, surrounded by enemy soldiers. Elara deflected an energy blast with her sword, while Leo punched an alien in the face with a resounding thud. "Is this what you imagined when you dreamed of being with an alien?" Princess Elara asked, her voice laced with amusement as she kicked another enemy to the ground. Leo laughed breathlessly. "I gotta admit, I thought there'd be more candlelit dinners and less, death and destruction." Elara grinned, slicing through another enemy. "I'll make it up to you later." "Oh, I'll hold you to that," Leo said, dodging a blow. "And maybe next time we can skip the whole galactic war thing." As the battle raged on, the tide of the fight began to turn in Xylora's favor. The enemy forces, caught off guard by Elara's leadership and the strength of the Xyloran defenses, began to retreat. Victory was within reach. Finally, after hours of relentless fighting, the last of the enemy ships fled and the battlefield fell silent. Xylora had won. The city was safe for now. Leo leaned against a nearby wall, catching his breath as he wiped sweat from his brow. Elara approached him, her face smudged with dirt but her eyes shining with relief. "We did it," Leo said, grinning at her. "Not bad for a couple of misfits." Elara nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. Not bad at all. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of everything they'd been through hanging between them. Then, in a rare moment of playfulness, Elara looked at Leo with a mischievous glint in her eyes. She said, her voice teasing, "I've been thinking about what you humans call love. I might have misunderstood it at first, but I think I'm starting to get the hang of it now." Leo raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Oh yeah? And what's your take on it now?" "Your Highness." Elara stepped closer, her expression both serious and playful. "Well, love is complicated. It's about fighting together, supporting each other, and—" She paused, leaning in slightly, her voice dropping to a whisper, knowing when to let someone else win an argument, even when you know you're right. Leo smirked. "Ah, the secret to a long-lasting relationship, huh?" Elara nodded, her smile growing. "Exactly. And in your case, Leo, I think you've earned the right to be wrong a little more often." Leo laughed. "I'm pretty sure that's not how it works, but I'll take what I can get." She chuckled softly, and then her voice grew more serious again. "But in all honesty, Leo, you've shown me something I never thought I'd understand. Love isn't just about power or control. It's about trust, vulnerability, and being willing to risk everything for someone else." Leo's playful grin softened into something more genuine. "And you, Princess, have shown me that sometimes the best things in life are the ones you never saw coming." They stood there for a moment, the bond between them stronger than ever, their future uncertain but full of possibility. Then, with a twinkle in his eye, Leo added, "Though, next time we save the planet, I vote we do it with a little less sword fighting and a little more, romantic dinners. Maybe a beach planet somewhere with fewer exploding spaceships." Elara smirked. "Are you saying you want to retire from galactic heroism so soon?" Leo raised his hands in mock surrender. "Not retire, exactly. Just take a vacation, somewhere nice where the only thing we're battling is who gets the last piece of dessert." Elara laughed, shaking her head. "You humans and your desserts." "Fine, Leo, after we finish rebuilding Xylora, I'll take you somewhere quiet. But I warn you, I don't lose in any battles." Desserts included. Leo grinned. "Oh, Princess, I wouldn't dream of winning that fight." Besides, there are plenty of sweeter things out there than dessert. He gave her a wink, his voice layered with dual meaning. Elara rolled her eyes, but there was a hint of amusement behind her serious expression. I'm beginning to think your love language is bad jokes. Leo leaned closer, his tone teasing. Maybe, but admit it, you love them. Elara tilted her head, pretending to consider his words before leaning in just a little closer. Maybe I do, but don't push your luck. Human Leo's grin widened. Too late for that, princess. I'm all in. And as they stood there, the weight of the galaxy on their shoulders but their hearts full, Leo knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, he and Elara would face them together with love, laughter, and just a little bit of trouble.